Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as I said this morning, I'm putting a focus on two words in the next 2 days, sharing and workshop. And it's now, we've got the official proceedings out of the way. It's now time to get into the work part of the workshop. And to do that, we're going to kick off with a session which is entitled Drinking from the Fire Hose, Making Sense of the Data Deluge. It's going to be moderated by Professor Lailufar Yasmin, and the panellists are Dr. David Brewster, Rear Admiral Jayarathna from the Sri Lankan Navy, retired, and as I said, coming to us from outer space, but really in Madagascar, it's Raj Mohabeer from the Indian Ocean Commission. Before we get started and I hand over to Lailufar, as I said, I run a tight ship. We've got a very busy program today. Some of you may have already noticed the big TV screen at the back of the room, which has at the moment 3 minutes on it. Each of our speakers today have been given 8 minutes. So you'll see that when they start speaking, that's going to change to 8. So I'm just advising our speakers, and I know our moderator will enforce this, to keep an eye on that time, such that we have a suitable period for questions and answers towards the end of the session. This is only a short one, only 40 minutes, so we need to make the most of it. So without any further ado, over to you, Lailufar.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to the very first session, which is titled very interestingly, Drinking from the Fire Hose, Making Sense of the Data Deluge. So in this session, we have 3 participants, as Simon said, and instead of me talking a lot as a moderator and taking advantage of that, I'd rather like to listen from the discussant first. As the order goes, Dr. David Brewster would talk first, and then we'll have Rear Admiral Jayarathna from Sri Lanka as the second speaker, and as the third speaker we have Mr. Raj Mohabeer from IOC. So without further ado, if I may request David to have your say, and you have got only 8 minutes. But the clock is still giving you extra 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Lailufar. So look, I'll jump straight into it, and as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, in my view, MDA is at the moment undergoing a paradigm shift that will force significant changes in the way practitioners do business. So today I'll talk about 3 things. 1, how has MDA evolved in recent decades? Secondly, what's this paradigm shift going on? And then thirdly, what are the consequences of it? So the starting point is, in the 20th century, MDA was essentially the job of navies, largely relying on data from official sources. And this was used to coordinate responses by navies and other agencies. This was done through effectively military operations centres, which coordinated naval responses to military and non-military threats. I call this MDA 1.0. But since the beginning of this century, there's been a broad recognition that this was insufficient. We required a broader range of information. And so over the last 20 years or so, there has been a move towards creating multi-stakeholder agencies or multi-stakeholder institutions, which allowed various national stakeholders to funnel information, which is then fused and then coordinated a whole of government national response. That's at least the theory. And I would call this MDA 2.0. So this has also been extended to regional centres, which allowed for regional information sharing, again between national agencies. But this is changing, And there's a paradigm shift, as I mentioned. It's really driven by a number of technological developments, including a whole range of new sensors, particularly satellite sensors, but increasingly surface and subsurface sensors, which generate huge amounts of data. As part of that, there has been the development of a number of online platforms which give MDA users direct access to this data. Some of the examples of that might be CVision or IORIS, Skylight, etc., as well as some privately operated for-profit platforms such as Starboard or Windward. And on top of this has been the development of AI to assist users in pulling this huge amounts of data together and making sense of that. That still has a long way to play out, but certainly in my view, what I see in going around fusion centres in the region is that young analysts will sit there with maybe 5 screens sitting open in front of them, trying to make sense of data from a whole range of different sources. They'll be seeing something on one platform and trying to almost manually correlate it against data from other platforms. So what are the implications, some of the implications of this paradigm shift? One is that MDA analysts have to deal with data from a whole diversity of different sources, of different trustworthiness, as against the sort of traditional model where they would be relying essentially on data from official sources. And this has obviously benefits as well as significant challenges in themselves. Secondly is an increased reliance on open source information. Again, traditionally, much of the data used by traditional MDA centres would be classified or semi-sensitive information. Suddenly, much of the information we are receiving comes from, say, satellite sources or other sources which may be open to the public. They may be coming from commercial providers or, I suppose, scientific satellites, etc. So what does it mean suddenly to be increasingly reliant on open source information? Similarly, this is particularly the case in international cooperation. There's really a lack of secure communications. So frequently MDA practitioners may be talking with their foreign colleagues via WhatsApp or an IORIS style platform which is non-secure. Does that matter? I don't know. It certainly means that potentially criminal organisations can have access to those communications under some circumstances, and maybe that means that MDA practitioners have to take that into account when they're making decisions that criminal elements or adversaries may be having access to that information as well. Thirdly is the growing importance of analytical capabilities. So young analysts in particular are suddenly swamped with this deluge of information which they need to deal with. Very often they are not trained to do that. They are trained in a sort of a much more narrow and traditional manner. Suddenly they have access to all of this information. How do they turn this information into actionable intelligence? Another consequence is potentially the democratisation of MDA. So this means that for the first time in history, smaller countries with less capabilities can have access to information which was previously not available and previously only available to larger and wealthier countries with greater capabilities. Another consequence is of all of this is the pressures on response capabilities. If you don't see anything, you're not expected to respond to it. If you do see a potential threat, there are much greater pressures to respond to that threat. In all of this, we should be not lose sight of the continued importance of human intelligence. It's not just the data coming from satellites and the like, but we still and we should make sure that we keep open the avenues of information and intelligence from human sources. And finally, I would argue that all this means that we need to be thinking about developing platforms that can bring all of this data together into a single platform and make sense of that. Now, that's a huge challenge, and it can be done in a different way, whether you're talking about a multilateral platform or a platform provided by a single provider, which allows users to like plug and play, I suppose, at different levels. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Professor Lailufar.
Yes. Thank you, David. That was providing a charter of how MDA has shifted over the time. But instead of making my comments, which I reserve for later, may I request Admiral? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's 8 minutes, not much of a time, so let me straight away fire on. MDA operators in the future will going to get bombarded with information. They will have avenues and ability to access many things. So we will be looking at a different picture when it comes to MDA operations in the future, because MDA is becoming a decision-making tool for the government. So drinking from the fire hose, something meant for something, fire hose meant for something, but it carries the water, and this water serves many other purposes, whether it is from thirsty or whether it is for something. So you can, how much you want to do with that is determined by how you use it. So something meant for something, but it will give an added advantage to the governments. So can I, yes. So let me emphasize these things to a practical session. Have a look at this photograph. This was in media about 1 month back when the China first demonstrated that they are first domestically built aircraft carrier that entered the service. Have a look at this photograph. Make a note of this island over here where my cursor is running. So about 30-40 years back, if I need to find out these things, it will take a lot of intelligence effort. But today, at the touch of a button, I'll be looking at these things. I'll be looking straight to Yulin Naval Base in Hainan Island, and I'll be completely focusing on this exact pier where the ship was berthed. The island, the other berth, this is where the 2 aircraft carriers were berthed. Now have a look at the photograph again. So this is the amount of information that are already with us for us to use. So how it relates to MDA? MDA is all about these tools. These tools are everywhere. So whether it is from the climate change, right now what is happening, or whether it is to satellite beams, which covers what are the active satellites and which area covers. So these things are just an example of things that are available to you at a touch of a button. The sat beams, which are used here. So how much our MDA operators would know about these things? It all depends on how much you want to engage. I recall my experience as a DG operation way back in 2020 when MT New Diamond caught fire in the Sri Lankan coastline. When we were discussing these things with the Attorney General came up with the idea that he is in the impression that this ship was a rogue ship. So someone in the close vicinity of the Attorney General's department has given him that feedback that this is a rogue ship. I said, what nonsense, sir? And I went to the system, marinetraffic.com, we were using the enterprise package at that time. I got down the complete tracks of this ship from 1st of January 2020 to till the date of accident. 8 times the ship has passed through Sri Lankan maritime jurisdiction, and that is the history. So these kind of tools are available. We never know when is our superior, whether it is a politician, whether it's a minister, or whether it is our own military system that will require this information, because these are required for decision making. And MDA operators will be required to know these things. So that makes the MDA as a specialist. And you cannot make this specialist within 1 year or 2 years. What I'm looking at is something like 5 years of a person to groom under this condition, to have that analytical capability, because the analytical capability is the one that will serve the government in the future. The system will have, the enemy will have, you will have, everyone will have the same systems available to you. But how much you extract from that is what it means by the drinking from the fire hose. So, ladies and gentlemen, with these things, I hope that you got the idea why it is important that we improve. We focus right now. The system are established, the navies are established, the MDA frameworks are established, but right now we need to focus more on our analytical capability and making the next generation of MDA specialists. If you don't do that, what will happen is it is another fire hose that will serve only one purpose. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral, for finishing it so quickly, in fact, and giving us some extra time later on maybe to take question answer. May I now request to connect with Mr. Raj Mohabeer, and sir, you have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam. Can you just do a signal whether you're able to listen to me?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to point out that all the points I'll be making, I'm referring to developing countries and not developed ones. Secondly, my intervention is based on what I have witnessed in my region, based on my experience for the last 15 years in this area. So I'm speaking about the Western Indian Ocean region. Things may differ in other regions. And thirdly, whatever I'm saying does not engage the Indian Ocean Commission but me, as I said, based on my observation and my experience in the region. Now, while I fully agree that there is a long list of new MDA tools, there is no deluge of data for developing countries. And I'll try to explain my point. And I'll therefore focus my intervention on the second part of the theme with respect to the challenges relating to MDA tools and data. I think that the very first and biggest barrier is related to the existing institutional and structural setup in our countries for the management of maritime zones and EEZs. Now, the existing systems in our countries have been there either just prior to independence or just after, but then the current institutional and structural setup is no more relevant and does not respond to the requirements for effective surveillance and control of the maritime zones. And I'll go even further in stating that, in my view, no developing countries is effectively managing its EZ. And I'll try to make 1 or 2 points relating to that. Now, as I said, I think that the most important challenge to initiate changes and undertake reforms in the way countries are managing their EZs is related to the fact that You see, this Regalian responsibility is either at the Prime Minister's office responsibility or the President's office. And it's very difficult to engage a dialogue with the Prime Minister's office or President's office in this regard. Not just it is a complex issue to engage in such dialogue, but it's also very difficult to get to be heard on what needs to be changed. So the tendency in our region, at least, what I see is that the overall maritime capability is reduced to the number of and the capacity of aerial and surface assets. There are lots of support that is provided by foreign countries in this area. And these support focus on those very costly assets, but very less on new technology and data and the use of data. So countries end up struggling with the maintenance of these high cost and not cost-effective assets and use. If you analyze the budget of the country, you'll see that most 90-95% of the cost is related to that issue. Now, whether these assets are able to achieve the end objective or not, this is where I think that it's not the case that much. In other words, we can now question how the assets are being used. For example, is there a mechanism to identify vessels of interest and then target the use of the assets towards that? For me, that answer is no. And how to change this and move from one situation where it is not cost effective to one it is cost effective. And this is where this workshop and this kind of work that is being done becomes very important. Now, the other very important issue is the fact that there is very limited exchange of information at national level and also very limited or no interagency cooperation at national level. I can take some examples to explain that, but that will take some time, so I will not be within my 8 minutes, but I'll try to. Now, the other very important point also is that this technology transfer is not there, and I believe that these technologies which are being developed in developing countries, in areas where there is lots of innovation, etc., is there a process for this transfer of technology? But at the same time of the transfer of technology, it's also very important to look at the human resource development in the countries. So there are many programs, and most of the programs also do not take into consideration the absorption capacity and the mandate of the concerned institutions on whether they're able to use these information to be used or not. So, for example, in our region, we have developed a vessel monitoring system for the management of fishing activities in the region. Now, that has been started in 2005. So, after 20 years, and I can tell you how effective is the VMS, whether the VMS has been able to enable the countries to say, okay, the VMS is supposed to give us 3 types of information: where the fishing vessel is, what it is catching, and how much it is catching. Is there a system in any of the countries in the region where they're saying, okay, we have given, for example, 400 licenses or 1,000 licenses. Let's check, based on the information that they're supposed to give, whether the provisions of the licenses are in conformity with the information we are getting from VMS. I'm telling you, there's none. Even regional VMS exists in February 2014, so more than 10 years. Are they being effective? No. And the reasons why is what I tried to explain earlier. Now, there is, on top of what David mentions about the issue of the democratization of MDA tools and MDA to the region, I think that there should be some discussions on what can be the means for the transfer of technology, cumulated with the fact of human resource development, and then looking at how we can look at the institutional and structural setup in each of the countries. The other issue which is very important is that you see much of those tools are also owned by the private sector, and as I said, the high costs of management of the EEZ is such that it prevents countries to go towards different way of operating, and then try to get from even from the private sector these tools. So I think that there is opportunity for the developed countries and developing countries to work together to try to see to it that these technologies and human resources are being developed, so that the countries in the region are able to develop, their own mechanisms, so that they can, exchange information internally, promote interagency cooperation, and then work towards, targeted use of the aerial and air surface assets towards vessels of interest, etc. So what I am trying to say here is that, there are lots of challenges which we need to focus on, and most of the time when there are programs which focus on particular tools and data, the focus is not on, well, why there is reluctance, why we're not giving results. So, for example, can someone try to explain to me why VMS, which exists for 2 decades in the region, has not been effective, though these tools have been put at the disposal of the countries? So, well, what can we do? What we should do? I think that this is what we'll be discussing today and tomorrow. We at the IOC, we've come up with the establishment of the regional maritime security architecture to try to demonstrate what we can do at regional level, and eventually try to push at national level, push the countries, so that we undertake a sort of progressive but small changes in the way the countries are managing their EEZs, and eventually, reach a level where, there is effectively, a good management of the EEZs, and then the end objective is there. So I will stop here because of the limitation of time, but you'll have the opportunity to listen to the representative of the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center, who is there, and also for the representative of the Regional Coordination Operation Center, who are also there. I will also complement and make some proposals tomorrow in my intervention that we'll have in the afternoon. And I believe that this workshop comes at a very opportune time, and I'm very sorry I couldn't come personally to see to it that this workshop contribute to the achievement of this workshop objectives. But I will be, of course, very, very interested to listen to all of you and eventually to contribute in a way so that the objectives of this workshop is achieved. So let me stop here, and I'll be very happy to take any questions from the floor. Thank you very much, Madam the Chair.
Thank you, sir, for pointing out a very essential question. Why can we not cooperate? That's the essence of your talk, and you identified different agencies who can cooperate, but in reality we do not see them cooperating. And how can we build effective cooperative platform between the underdeveloped and the developed countries? Right now we'll take questions, and our session will be on for 15 minutes more. Before that, what we'll do, we'll take a set of questions. Please state your name and your institution, and keep your question short and relevant, and address if you want a particular speaker to sort of answer your question. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Please.
Thank you. I'm Commodore Mahmudul Hassan, Additional Secretary, Maritime Affairs Unit. My question is regarding knowing the environmental information, which is also a vital part. So how to integrate the environmental information, how to get the environmental information, how to interpret the environmental information into our maritime domain awareness use. So I want to just clarify on this issue. Thank you.
Anyone in particular you want to answer? No, there's a question. Yeah, please. David.
Thank you very much for giving me the microphone. And first, I'd like to convey my heartfelt thanks and compliments to everyone who are associated with organizing this wonderful conference or workshop. Okay, my name is Mahfouz. Actually, I'm a freelancer, I take classes at a few universities. I also write articles for some English newspapers. Okay. My question is, well, I've attended another few seminars and workshops on maritime issues, maritime affairs in Dhaka. And my point is, well, to make people in Bangladesh in particular, to make people, affiliated with maritime lineaments, it is important, I believe, to add a chapter on maritime history or maritime, these maritime things, add a chapter on the maritime internments in our universities, particularly in English department or in history department, because we know there are lots of literary masterpieces in different languages, in English, in French, in Russian, and these books translated versions are also available in Bangladesh. So in this way we can make our academia, our students, our youngsters who are going to hold the helm of the country in days to come, maritime knowledge can be disseminated in this way to our youngsters and also to our faculty members who are in charge of giving lectures in the classroom. Whether our government or our stakeholder holders have anything like that on their cards. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah, okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Commander Rahim. I'm presently working in IFC Hour India on behalf of Bangladesh Navy. Thank you for giving me the scope. Before I want to describe the issue, I would like to highlight it's a very pertaining topic, that the drinking from the fire hose. So actually, as a practitioner in IFC Hour, we are finding number of maritime domain awareness online platform, and it's giving different types of data. Even the AIS information between two MDA platform doesn't commensurate or match each other. So this is one issue. Another issue is that so far in my small career, I have found that most of the workshop, most of the seminar, or even the information fusion centers are focused on regional issue, but not a specific threat issue. So what happening when you are focusing on a regional issue, and maritime domain is vast and there are number of problems, number of issues. So you are getting the information, or you are talking the information that is vast in quantity, and as you can say, that data deluge. So in that case, do you think that a specific workshop or seminar focusing on threat-specific issues could be help us to swim or to get direction in this data deluge? Thank you.
Good question. David?
Thank you. I'll try and answer two questions. I think the point raised by Commodore Hassan is an absolute, the important one. How do we bring environmental information into the data set for fusion centres? And I'll defer to Admiral Jayarathna on some of the specifics of that, but I think it's, particularly with climate change, it's really up there as a key issue and a key challenge for all fusion centres. I think the comment from the gentleman over here on trying to focus on addressing threats on a thematic basis, I think is an important one, because it allows you to dive deeply into how to address drug interdiction or IUU or etc. My only caution is that many of these threats are interrelated, so an IUU fishing boat may well also be carrying drugs or arms, or slavery, using slavery, etc. So we have to be a little bit careful because of the interrelationships there.
Let me add something to complement these things. So it's looking at all the three questions, my response is that it is all what the state want to do. If the state want to do certain things, the furtherance that it can go is immense. It is limitless, I would say. But the government decide this to do, then they need someone to do it. So obviously it will be either Navy or the Coast Guard. Then comes the manpower issues. So does the institution make that future generation to serve the government? So this is a question that you should be looking at your own organization. Let's take a look at what is happening now. Let me take time to explain this BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. Now, it has given tremendous responsibilities to the coastal states. So how much the state is ready for that? And that will require a lot of MDA inputs. So how much is your own system is catering for that? Without statistics and without data, how can you make an informed decision? So these are the aspects that you need to look at. So having different data format in different platform, it will be there. Don't worry about those things. What matters is how you interpolate and you interpret this data. So when you have this number of sources, different data, you might be seeing these things, but when you have that experience, you will know how to extract things and how to make a decision with the correct thing. Now with the environment, of course the Bay of Bengal is, I would say it's my understanding is Bay of Bengal is when environmentally it is nicely covered. We have a huge Indian system and the Bangladeshi system, but all this Met department in these countries will be using some of the latest and their self-developed softwares to stimulate and forecast. Add to that will be your practitioner's experience. With that, we will be in a better position to manage things that are coming up. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mohabeer, would you like to comment?
Yes, please. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment. I'd like to maybe take the questions in a different way. For example, the issue of including, getting universities and institutions to include particular modules or studies. I think this is indeed very important. I think that there is a need for developing countries to beef up, their universities to include modules or include, studies for maritime security related, etc. And in this respect, I think that it is not possible for a few countries to do that. I think that it's very important for us to work towards a network of universities and research institutions that can be contributing to better understand what is happening in the region, why certain things are what they are. So I would think that just on top of just one or two universities, I think that it would be very important to identify and do an inventory of all institutions and universities and who is doing what, and then eventually to target based on priorities that can be developed or identified by countries. So for example, Mauritius and Seychelles, they want that the issue of drug trafficking is being tackled. So we can try to understand what is the overall, production of the drugs, where it is done. Some studies have been done in the university, but we need to go deep down into these kind of issues and then see how that can be managed. And likewise in many other areas related to maritime security. The second point I wanted to make is that, one of the questions was relating to regional and specific themes. You see, IU fishing, I think it's a regional issue. It's a global issue. What we've understood is that IU fishers in this region, they fish in EEZs, in the near boundaries of EEZs. So for example, for the Mauritius, one of the most, fastest asset, Barracuda, it will take 2.5 days to reach the north part of its EEZ close to Seychelles. And Seychelles will take more than a day to reach the southern part of Seychelles EEZ. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of things where IU fishers, they seize that opportunity, knowing very well that it takes too long for the assets to come and to try to check them. So they fish a few days in this EEZ of one country and a few days EEZ of another country. And that's how the problem of IU fishing continues to remain a big issue. The same thing of drugs. That when 3 weeks ago, there was a big consignment of more than a ton of heroin and other drugs that were seized by Kenya. Now, that amount of drug were not meant for Kenya. It was meant for other countries as well, in the region and elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say, giving these two examples, is that at times the specific themes, it's good, but also these themes and most of this, including, for example, marine pollution, they are regional in nature. The threats and the issues relating to those themes are regional in nature. So I think that there is no contradiction in focusing on regional matters. At the same time, these, if they are regional in nature, which I think most of the maritime security issues, they are. And my last point about the climate change, and we have to understand something that's very important, that is that, you see, we have lots to do. And I think there is a need for priority setting. It's indeed very important to include climate change, which is a hot topic for the time being. But what would it add in terms of what we need to do? So, yes, I think that there is an issue of environmental indicators and data to be included in the regional IFCs. But at the same time, we should, I think, put on the table, if this is a regional priority, a national priority, then yes. So we have, but we have to, make priorities. We have to have priorities because we can't deal with everything. Right now, developing countries can't deal.
Yeah.
I stop here, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We probably have time for one question, and I've been seeing hand raised by Ms. Babhai. Please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. I just want to make a comment, not a question, to connect all the three questions, the beautifully placed questions from the environment to the data and also the maritime literacy. To Mr. Mahfouz, I would love to say that the very happening of this workshop is an indicator that we are actually inching forward, if not marching, towards the ocean literacy, and gradually we would be also looking forward to include in our curricula about the maritime history and heritage. However, it takes time, and I think all on a sudden in a post-grade curricula, it's better maybe from the kindergarten when you ask your children to draw starfish and the sea coast and so on, so gradually they build up. About the environment, Bangladesh is worst victim, one of the worst victim of the sea level rise and so on. And I think MDA, when it speaks about threats, it of course includes all types of threats, traditional and non-traditional. But sir, as you said, a data takes. I am currently working with one of the Florida-based NGO, and the researchers they shared in Florida, they have collected data for 30 years. Now, our policymakers must understand, they want it like that. But research work doesn't work like that. You need to have observation, and you see 30 years is a big span of time. And I think that we need to have more patience, particularly you guys who are in the policy making level. You should have patience, and you should provide us finance so that we can do good research. So thank you so very much.
Thank you all, and it has been, we don't have time actually, we have just 30 seconds. So can you make a quick question, and then maybe we'll wrap up. Just a quick question.
Thank you, Chair. I am Lieutenant Commander Rohit. I didn't want to have any question, but I need to, with your permission, make some comments about the discussion which happened.
May we have the comments rather later? Yes. Thank you. If it were a question, I would have taken it. Let me thank the panelists in this session, because we have started off with an overall understanding of where MDA was, how it evolved, what are the role of data, and what are the how we transform information into something actionable, and specifically coming from different parts of Indian Ocean region, we need to understand each other's problem and how can we create more interoperability and interagency cooperation. And as one pointed out, that maritime education and training, how can we integrate into the overall national curricula of different countries. I take pleasure in thanking all the presenters. Let's have a big hand for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to the panellists. The speed dating will continue. Could you just please remain in place while we get ready for the next session, which is going to start straight away. We're just going to move the two extra seats up, and we're just going to drop a laptop in here as well. Sir, you want to? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get the next session underway, and this is, we've heard about drinking from the fire hose just in the first session. We're now going to try and break that down a little further with the first of our country case studies, in this instance from Australia. I'm very privileged to have pretty much a full court press from Maritime Border Command, where we will have Flight Lieutenant Olivia Fricker. She's going to be presenting. We've got Michael Booth, who's from the Singapore IFC that works for Australian Maritime Border Command. Nathan, Wright and Jason, once again from Border Force. Olivia is going to be presenting. She's been given 35 minutes on the clock. She assures me that could be done. Now, I know some of you may have noticed that during my opening comments earlier this morning that I omitted Canberra from the list of cities who have established information fusion centres, or IFCs. This was intentional. As many of you know, Australia has a large maritime border operations centre in Canberra, which essentially fulfils the same purpose as the other IFCs. And that it gathers all sorts of information about what's happening in the Australian maritime sphere and shares it with other relevant agencies, both domestically and internationally. But I suppose the specific point of difference is, and this is where I start to become a little bit controversial, I suppose, is that I find that this centre doesn't have or aim to have the same network of international liaison officers which are contained within the other regional IFCs. Is this a help or a hindrance to information sharing? I'll just leave that as an advanced copy of one of my questions during the Q&A. Additionally, we heard in session one about the enormous amount of data that's available to IFCs and other similar centres like the one in Canberra. How do we deal with this information to accurately correlate and classify vessels of interest? As I said, I've introduced the panel, and I'm now going to let Olivia take it away. So the person in charge of the clock, 35 minutes, so we have some good time for Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Simon. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Flight Lieutenant Olivia Fricker from the Maritime Border Command in Australia. Obviously, my uniform is a little different to my colleagues here today. I am actually an intelligence officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. So information sharing is a very pertinent theme for me, as this subject matter is quite different to what I'm used to. So after roughly 3 years, I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about. But I do want to highlight that I do have a wealth of knowledge on this panel with me today if you do have questions. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about this morning information sharing. We'll cover who we are as Maritime Border Command, what our mission is, how we're governed, case studies of information sharing and who we liaise with, our Maritime Domain Intelligence and Operations Group process, so how we begin our coordination and response process, and we'll go into some case studies at the end. So Maritime Border Command was established in 2015 as the standing multi-agency task force responsible for the orchestration of civil maritime security in the Australian maritime domain. As you can see on this panel today, we wear many uniforms with a common goal. We work collaboratively with key international and domestic partners to advance our civil maritime security outcomes, to reinforce the global rule-based order and further Australia's national interests. We are comprised of both Australian Border Force, Australian Defence Force and civil maritime security enforcement agencies. We support the whole of government effort to protect Australia's national interest by coordinating and executing civil maritime security operations to illegal activities within the Australian maritime domain. Our ongoing engagement with domestic and international partners is therefore critical in achieving mission success through the coordination of ISR platforms and response efforts. All right, so that's who we are. Now, how are we governed? We receive guidance from the Guide to Australian Maritime Security Arrangement, or the GAMSA, a whole-of-government document that defines the 8 civil maritime security threats and the shared responsibilities of federal, state and territory governments to address them. It helps stakeholders understand their roles in preventing illegal activities and protecting Australia's interests in its maritime domain, covering threats such as illegal fishing, biosecurity risks and maritime terrorism. Australia's national objective for civil maritime security is to deter or prevent illegal activity from occurring in Australia's maritime jurisdiction and, when necessary, to interdict and enforce Australian laws. And in terms of the tonnage of cargo shipped and kilometres travelled, Australia is the world's 5th largest shipping nation, and Australian and foreign ships carry Australian passengers, crew and cargo within and beyond Australian waters. Australia, therefore, has strong economic and national interests in maintaining civil maritime security with and beyond Australian waters. It is understood that agencies have finite resources, and therefore it is necessary to work together in an effective and efficient way to manage those threats that pose the highest risk. We recognise, however, that not all illegal activity can be deterred or prevented, and that the appropriate response and recovery measures are required to manage the risks posed by civil maritime security threat actors. All right, so in our GAMSA there are 8 civil maritime security threats, and they're highlighted on our slides here. The 3 highlighted in red are the primary threats covered by Maritime Border Command, with unauthorised maritime arrivals, or you read that as people smuggling, our commander's top priority, followed by the illegal exploitation of natural resources, which includes illegal foreign fishing, and then prohibited imports and exports, being the import of border-controlled drugs. While countering these threats are critical for our mission's success, we actually don't hold primacy over them. However, I will say we do hold primacy over maritime terrorism. Knock on wood, at the moment, that is not a current point of concern or contention in our Australian maritime territories. But if that were to be raised, we would be the lead agency for that. So for unauthorised maritime arrivals, our Operation Sovereign Borders, a military-led border security operation established in 2013, prevents people from entering Australia by boat or without a visa. The Australian Fisheries Management Authority is responsible for the illegal exploitation of natural resources, including illegal foreign fishing. And the Australian Federal Police hold jurisdiction of the prohibited imports and exports threat. So we are definitely the enabling body to coordinate the information sharing between agencies dependent on the civil maritime security threat. Again, we rely on creating these robust information sharing and intelligence networks in order to facilitate the seamless and timely information sharing between agencies such as the Australian Federal Police, Australian Defence Force, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Australian Geographic Organisation, and the Office of National Intelligence. I want to highlight here that Maritime Border Command, we are members of the Intelligence Centre at Maritime Border Command. However, our responsibility is to our former operational command. So being that enabling body between agencies allows us to coordinate with our operational command how we best create an on-water response to our threat actors. The current information sharing network engaged by Maritime Border Command through bilateral and multilateral agreements includes direct data exchange through the Indian Ocean Region Information Fusion Centre and the Singapore Information Fusion Centre. We have regular meetings to discuss emerging tactics and techniques and procedures, or TTPs, observed and any challenges or successes relating to their organisations and ad hoc vessels of interest related to intelligence.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Commander Michael Booth, and as per the introduction, I am the Australian Liaison Officer into Singapore Information Fusion Centre. Now, I'm going to talk to you about that later, but I'm just going to take a minute to sort of explain why I'm up here on this panel. So as I said, my position is actually part of the Maritime Border Command team. Despite working in a desk on Changi Naval Base in Singapore, my boss is actually about 4,000 kilometres away in Canberra, and I share a boss with Liv. So despite being dislocated geographically, I'm blessed to have the linkages back to MBC, which means I can access their information. So part of that is having a MOU established. So IFC, Singapore and MBC has an established MOU which outlines the ability to share white shipping information and maritime security threats, which is allowing us to be able to better share information. I'm able to get that information directly from MBC. So being embedded forward into Singapore Fusion Centre means that I'm able to work with the different teams within MBC, the Intel team, but also the fisheries team and the contraband smuggling team and the different teams that were up on the slide just before. I can get that information pretty much sent straight from MBC that I can then get downloaded straight into the IFC databases to be able to ensure that MBC's information, MBC's interests are fed into the greater regional picture. So that means we can fuse it better with the other regional teams. So not only are we getting things like arrivals into Australia, but we're also able to fuse it with departures from other regional areas to sort of get a better picture of the overall area. So we talked about the MBC establishing its own fusion centre. That is being called the Australian Border Operations Centre, so ABOC. So what that does is it brings operation units and representatives from within Border Force, as well as Maritime Border Command, but as well as a lot of other domestic partners. So this allows a bunch of oversight and input into any operational matters that are being conducted on a day-to-day basis. It allows a comprehensive, consolidated picture of what's going on in the region, and it allows that information to be shared much broader and widely than if it was happening solely internally. Back to Liv.
Thanks, sir. So this is just an example of how my team specifically uses the Singapore Information Fusion Centre to generate open source products to inform our operational command of regional activity. So whether we're going to see threats occurring in the region flow down to Australian territories. So it is really critical because a lot of our reporting occurs at like the protected level at the maximum classification. So having access to open source information through the Singapore IFC and the Indian Ocean IFC is really critical for us. So this is for people smuggling here. And the import of border controlled drugs here. So again, if we see changes in the trends of types of border controlled drugs, flows of potential illegal immigrants, which cohorts we're seeing more of, and if they will be coming to Australia. These next two slides are examples of information sharing cooperation between Maritime Border Command and agencies from other countries. So this is Operation Gannet, joint patrol between Maritime Border Command and BACLMA, as well as the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries and the Director General of Customs and Excise. The intent of this operation was to conduct coordinated patrols in the designated area of operation to detect, deter and respond to illegal maritime activities in order to enhance cooperation and integration between Australian and Indonesian civil maritime security partners. The operation usually consists of Indonesian air riders travelling to Australia, Maritime Border Command representatives embedded in BACLMA, and KKP command centres, and the successful sharing of information and maritime domain awareness material, such as vessel data position, every 6 hours. This operation has been held since 2018. The patrol usually occurs twice a year and focuses on issues of illegal foreign fishing, as well as transnational serious organised crime in our shared area of operation. Right, this is Operation Sandalwood, an annual bilateral activity between Maritime Border Command and the Government of Timor-Leste for the purposes of maritime surveillance, training and response cooperation. Op Sandalwood focuses on improving the Government of Timor-Leste's understanding of civil maritime security threats in Timor-Leste's southern EEZ, primarily through Maritime Border Command's provision of air surveillance patrols and the sharing of resultant reporting. In 2020, Australia conducted the first iteration of this exercise for Timorese personnel, and the training involved 2 Timorese personnel being trained on an Australian patrol boat sailing from Dili to Darwin. In traversing Timor-Leste's southern EEZ, the patrol boat came across foreign fishing vessels, and the Maritime Domain Awareness Training in Australian Defence Force was led as part of the Pacific Patrol Boat program intended to continue across 2020. This involved the training of Timorese personnel on aircraft and further boat patrols, which all traverse our shared EEZ. And of course, COVID-19 threw a few spanners in the works for this one. All right, so I've gone through some examples of why information sharing is so important for our Maritime Border Command Intelligence Centre and our response to the civil maritime security threats. I'm going to take you now through our Maritime Domain Intelligence and Operations Group process and how we start that coordination piece for the on-water response. I do want to caveat here, the need to know principle is incredibly important in our line of work as intelligence practitioners. We have quite a few sensitive source material, sources, human sources, and caveats from our partner agencies. As we do not hold primacy over these threats or the reporting, we do not have the appropriate ability to share and pass on information as that easily. So whenever we do work with sensitive material, we are definitely required to seek permission to share information as widely as we can. However, sometimes that can't be achieved. Alright, so our Maritime Domain Intelligence Group, or MDIG, exists to enable a whole-of-government counter-drug operation response with a maritime nexus to detect, identify, disrupt and dismantle transnational serious organised crime networks targeting Australia. We are an intelligence sharing platform within the Maritime Domain Intelligence Group, and it's designed to streamline the collaboration and coordination between key stakeholders to assess the credibility and threat of an imminent maritime import. From a Maritime Domain Intelligence Group, the Director of Intelligence, so my boss, will decide whether a Maritime Domain Operations Group is necessary. Now, we convene Maritime Domain Intelligence Groups in a few ways. So we hold monthly Maritime Domain Intelligence Groups and operational ad hoc groups as needed to ensure flexibility in our response to emerging threats. Any partner in our Maritime Domain Intelligence Group is able to call one of these meetings to coordinate and effect a time-sensitive response. When and if our Maritime Domain Intelligence Group recommends an operational group, we provide a comprehensive intelligence brief to all stakeholders at the outset and continue to deliver written and verbal updates whenever the meetings reconvene. So members of our Maritime Domain Intelligence Group include the Australian Border Force, so us, we do lead the majority of our MDIGs, Australian Federal Police, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, and the Australian Signals Directorate. These organisations bring together a wealth of expertise, resources and operational capabilities. Their ongoing commitment ensures that we remain vigilant and responsive to emerging risks across Australia's maritime and land borders. To the right of this slide, our collaborative framework, we recognise the invaluable contributions of our allied international partners. These agencies attend as required and provide critical support and intelligence that enhance our collective effectiveness. Their participation strengthens our ability to respond to transnational threats, share best practices, and coordinate operations that span multiple jurisdictions. The presence of these partners underscores the global nature of the challenge we face and the importance of international cooperation. On the left side of the screen, our partnership network, we have our domestic partners who attend as required to address specific threats and operational needs. The strength of the MDIG lies in our collaborative approach, bringing together a diverse range of agencies, both domestic and international, to form a unified front against criminal activity and border threats. Each member and partner play a vital role, contributing to unique skills and perspectives that enhance our overall effectiveness. The criteria for convening our MDIGs is essential for us to understand the specific scenario under which we can convene one. This clarity ensures our response is both timely and effective, regardless of our individual roles within the organisation. As this MDIG exists to provide coordinated intelligence, rapid decision-making, and targeted action in situations where maritime imports may pose risks or heightened security, convening this group is not a routine measure. It is reserved for instances where actionable intelligence and operational readiness are paramount. To convene an MDIG, at least one of the following 3 scenarios must be satisfied, and each scenario is designed to ensure that we have sufficient information to justify the mobilisation of resources and expertise. Adhering to these scenarios ensures that our actions are intelligence-driven, justified, and proportionate. It prevents unnecessary mobilisation while guaranteeing that we are prepared when the situation demands it. Every member of our team regardless of their role, play a vital part in recognising these triggers and supporting the MDIG's mission. We have identified several key intelligence gaps that are critical to our operational objectives, so therefore we use this intelligence gap table here to inform our criteria. So it is quite small on the screen, so don't worry if you can't see it or read it. Throughout the week and for our tabletop exercise, you will receive a copy of this. All right, so we've got the MDIG covered. So from an MDIG, we are able to recommend to our operational command a Maritime Domain Operations Group. This is definitely on a case-by-case basis. So the Maritime Domain Operations Group, or MDOG, is a vital initiative developed to strengthen our collective response to organised crime within our maritime domain. It was established through the collaborative efforts of our relevant national intelligence community agencies and is responsible, or its purpose really, is to create a robust mechanism for the cooperation among participating Commonwealth agencies. By working together, we aim to identify, target, disrupt and dismantle domestic and transnational organised crime groups that are responsible for importing, and in some cases exporting, border-controlled drugs via our maritime borders. Membership in the Maritime Domain Operations Group is broad and inclusive. It brings together representatives from the national intelligence community and standing members of the Maritime Domain Intelligence Group. This diverse representation ensures that we have the expertise, resources and perspectives necessary to address the complex challenges posed by organised crime in the maritime environment. At the operational level, each organisation participating in the MDOG is entrusted with several key responsibilities: to provide timely and accurate advice to the Maritime Domain Operation Group regarding the decisions and positions of their respective business areas and areas of operations, communicate relevant information and request to their respective areas about the concerning MDOG matters. Members of the Maritime Domain Operations Group are empowered to make decisions on behalf of their organisation, and this authority enables swift and decisive action, which is critical in fast-paced and dynamic context of maritime crime prevention. Right, so similar to the MDIG, we have a criteria to go to an MDOG. So this criteria provides clarity on the credibility of the threat and the threat reporting and its associated assessed risk. The strategic deployment of intelligence platforms to address our key intelligence gaps is critical. So if our analysis places the threat at a moderate to high degree, corresponding to a classification of, say, like a C2 Admiralty rating, which we'll go through later, based on multiple corroborating sources and recent intelligence indicators, we are more inclined to take that more seriously than we were to like a lower, a lesser credible threat. We must also consider, however, that despite the credibility of the threat, there remain critical intelligence gaps that must be addressed to ensure a comprehensive response, including the identity and location of shore elements, so who's involved and where they are operating, inclusive of like a mother or daughter vessel. The input methodology, so Maritime Border Command, we are solely focused on at-sea transfers, being the drop at sea or the ship-to-ship transfer. We are still interested in like containerized methodologies, but we do not hold primacy over that methodology. And to address the intelligence gaps of these threats, the intent is to deploy intelligence platforms tailored to collect and analyze the necessary information, to focus on surveillance and reconnaissance, enhance monitoring of coastal areas and maritime approaches, and to identify any suspicious activity. And ideally, the deployment of these platforms, whether it be aerial, land, or even human sources, is expected to directly answer our key intelligence questions, enabling us to identify the shore element, track the relevant vessels, and understand the input methodology being used. All right, and again, just some more considerations for the convening of an MDOG. So we do hold a lead with the Maritime Domain Operations Group, and so these responsibilities we keep very close hold and it's of high importance for us. And this model just represents our Maritime Domain Intelligence Group and Maritime Domain Operations Group process and the collective commitment to safeguard Australia's borders, to deny the import of border-controlled drugs through the maritime domain. This refined model exemplifies the power of collaboration, intelligence-driven decision-making, and operational excellence. And it's been very effective. However, nothing is perfect, so we can always work and do better together. But we've seen some great success from this model. Talking about our successes, this is the kind of exciting part. We're going into case studies now. All right, so bear with me, this might get a bit long, but I do want to highlight that the majority of the outcomes here in the process actually don't come to fruition. So whether reporting is credible or not, threats change their intent. So we have seen some really good successes in terms of interdiction, but unfortunately there are those cases where reporting fizzles out, but it has stood the testament of time, this process. It's been very effective. All right, so between December 2023 and January of 2024, cargo vessel MV Nami was identified conducting a highly unusual voyage departing from Kaohsiung, Taiwan, making its way towards Australia. So our Maritime Domain Awareness team at Maritime Border Command actually identified this vessel as it was quite suspicious. It was venturing out of its normal pattern of life. So once it left Taiwan, it declared its destination as Busan in South Korea. However, immediately after departure, the vessel altered its course and actually headed straight towards Sydney. This change raised a few concerns for us, and so we maintained vigilance of its track, noting there were some AIS gaps. I do want to highlight too, this vessel also underwent several flag changes, being registered under Guyana, Sierra Leone and Belize before switching to Tanzanian flags in 2023. And doing so sort of highlights their use of flags of convenience. During its transit, the vessel drew attention from not only our Australian maritime partners, but international partners as well. And although we didn't receive any reporting to indicate this vessel was involved in illicit activity, but the flags we were concerned were enough to sort of incite this Maritime Domain Intelligence Group process and eventually a Maritime Domain Operations Group process. Upon further investigation and coordination with our international and domestic partners, we identified that the vessel was actually transporting almost 200 tonnes of illicit tobacco, which is quite significant. It's quite a significant quantity for Australia. However, we still had nothing to really... That reporting was assessed as possible. So it wasn't strong enough for us to coordinate an effective response. And it's a bit tricky with prohibited imports and exports where we can convene the coordination of an operational response. However, my team in Maritime Border Command, we actually sit outside of the Tobacco Task Force remit. So it can get very confusing for us, and we work there. So this was a good example and a good test of our procedures, because this vessel loitered in our waters for a good 2 to 3 months. So the intention behind the vessel's voyage remained unclear for its entire transit. There were a few hails conducted of this vessel, but nothing substantial or reliable came from their responses. It actually had loitered out there for so long that they required refueling. They had run out of stores, and after we had to assist them in the resupply of their stores, it then departed on the way back. So it left our waters, thankfully. So this case was a stark reminder of the complexities involved in monitoring global shipping and combating illicit trade. So it was a very new threat set for us, and of course it happened over Christmas. The vessel's frequent flag change, route deviations, and involvement in the transport of legal goods underscore the importance of robust tracking systems and strong international partnerships. Funnily enough, in December of 2024, we identified the vessel of interest, the Koku, another Taiwanese flagged vessel transiting towards Australia. Now, we still had the proceedings of the NAMI in the back of our minds when this one came up, so we're very suspicious from the offset. Again, we had no reporting to indicate this vessel was involved in any illicit activity. However, as the operation progressed, Koku began to display a series of concerning behaviours that warranted closer scrutiny from our teams. We were very quick on this one following our NAMI situation, so we conducted a few aerial hails, during which the crew of the Koku declared their next port of call was Tasmania, and then it would eventually go to Auckland in New Zealand. These declarations were quickly dismissed after we engaged with our New Zealand partners and received information from the Taiwanese authorities. So information from Taiwan actually indicated the vessel had, again, illicit tobacco on board. We also identified that the vessel on their open source platforms was not destined for Australia. It was in fact destined for Vietnam and the Philippines. So quite a few concerns there of information not aligning with what they were telling us. So much like the NAMI, this vessel loitered off of our coast for approximately 4 weeks, raising additional suspicions about its activities and intentions. Again, we received no reporting to confirm what it was up to. So our Maritime Domain Awareness team maintained close vigilance of this vessel, maintaining open and ongoing communication with our international partners, and at times the MV Koku when we continued to hail it. So this vessel also ended up departing our waters in January of this year and set course for Noumea, New Caledonia. Recognising the urgency of this situation, we didn't want to let this one slip through, so we worked in close coordination with New Caledonian authorities to coordinate an intercept of this vessel. This collaborative effort culminated on the 5th of February this year when Koku was successfully interdicted in New Caledonia. Authorities actually seized approximately 76 tonnes of illicit tobacco and 2 large speedboats from this vessel. So it not only disrupted a major smuggling attempt, but also demonstrated the effectiveness of international cooperation in safeguarding our maritime borders. So while it may not have been a success for Australian Maritime Border Command, it was a massive success for New Caledonia and for our international cooperation. Alright, vessel of interest 2508, a case that has drawn significant attention from maritime authorities and international partners. So this is, I guess, an example of historical tracking data revealing a vessel of interest from our Maritime Domain Awareness team in March of this year. So the vessel undertook a southerly route, navigating through the South China Sea, the Malacca Strait, and continued southward through the Cocos-Keeling Island, exclusive economic zone. So it was pretty evidently heading towards our west coast. On the vessel, there was no fishing gear observed on the upper deck. However, there was a go-fast boat stowed at the aft section. These features raised concerns, prompting further scrutiny from Maritime Border Command. International agencies were approached for additional information regarding this vessel. However, unfortunately, no further information was received. So again, another example of no information being received of its intentions, so no pre-arrival documentation had been received. So again, working with very little here, so reaching out to our international partners and a lot of our domestic agencies too, just to sort of identify what it could be doing. Our job as intelligence professionals is to assess what a threat is doing if we don't necessarily know what it is doing. So we did come up with that this was involved, possibly involved in mothership operations. However, through its journey, no interactions with other vessels or entities was identified, so it ended up turning back and departing Australian waters. I'll just skip through a few of these, noting time. I'll go to Cape Canary. So this vessel was interesting. This is a Japanese bulk carrier, and it was reported to be en route to Port Walcott in Western Australia. However, it raised concerns due to its odd movements. It was outside of its normal pattern of life. So typically it travels through the Philippines and South China Sea to reach Port Walcott. However, this voyage was unusual, as it had obviously gone to like Central South America, loitered for a fair while, and then departed, heading through the Pacific to Australia. We had convened a Maritime Domain Intelligence Group and an Operations Group to, I guess, facilitate a response and a boarding. So it transited through our Torres Strait, over our north coast and into Port Walcott, because we wanted to identify what it was doing in Central South America and why and what it was bringing into Australia. So we pulled a lot of resources to coordinate our response for this, and it actually turned out there was a port closure in Central South America. It was nothing nefarious. They were just loitering in that area to wait for further direction from their owner. Because that port had closed, there was a piece of equipment had broken. So again, a good example of if we had, I guess, been a bit more proactive in investigating with more partners to assess what it could be doing, we could have saved our time for that. Noting time is up, I will leave it there. So I guess if you've got any questions, please give us a shout.
Thank you, Olivia, and could you please put your hands together for that very comprehensive brief on how Australia does business in this area, and it never ceases to amaze me that the job that NBC does with regards to bringing together all the relevant agencies. Be it within the intelligence group or within the operations group, and I think it behoves everybody to look back into their own countries and see whether similar things are done. I'm sure they are, but I suppose this is what's most available to me. I'm going to open the floor shortly to questions, but I can't resist. I'm going to use the moderator's privilege here because, as I mentioned in my opening comments, Obviously, I've got representatives from Maritime Border Command, but also I have a liaison officer from the Singapore IFC. And it was interesting looking at the slides with regards to information sharing and the various links that are formed under MOUs bilaterally. And as I said in my earlier comments, MBC doesn't have any international liaison officers. So my question to the panel, does an MOU replace an international liaison officer when it comes to information sharing?
Look, I think in short, yes. Australia is doing a whole bunch of work in the region to sign and work with our partner countries in getting some additional MOUs signed to allow that information sharing to occur without physical presence of an officer. I'm sure you can all appreciate, and we all have the same issue with classification of information, and the way of getting it to our partners can sometimes be an issue, but we certainly work with all our partners to ensure that we share everything that we can, so that we're ensuring a safer region for everybody.
I guess without short-circuiting the entire, what I'm going to talk about this afternoon, I think it depends on what you're doing and what your context is. We can't all have ILOs everywhere because that would be too much. You know, if everyone is embedded into everybody else, then there's not really anyone left to work at home. So you have to have a balance, right? Some places will have people in seats doing the talking and the conferencing. Other places should need robust information sharing agreements to be able to maintain access and information sharing. And I think it depends on the mission, what you're trying to get after, the context that you're working in, and the people that you're working with, as to what's more benefit. I don't think there's no right or wrong answer there. I think both is necessary, and they both bring their own advantages. Talk about more later.
Yep, no problems. Thanks. Now open up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? I mean, there was a lot of information in there. Anybody? Captain, over here.
Good morning. My name is Captain R.S. Savan from the National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. My question to the panel is, considering that Australia has a huge EEZ, perhaps the third largest in the world, do you face any problems of data deluge, which was spoken about in the first session, considering that so many ships and vessels will be transiting your area? The second connected part is that do you think, which Mr. Raj Mohabeer in the previous session had alluded to, that by the time you send a patrol vessel or an aircraft to the scene or the vessel of interest, it's too late. So do you face such challenges? Thank you.
For the data deluge, yes, we do face that a lot. So I won't talk on behalf of Maritime Domain Awareness, but I know you guys have to do a lot of work and a lot of incredible work. In terms of like reporting for my team, so my team sits in the space where we trawl through data or reporting to identify and assess what a threat is doing. So whether it's people smuggling or drug smuggling. For the most part, it's pretty good. Like, we work very closely with our federal police and our other maritime law enforcement agencies, and we've sort of created our relationship so that they know what information they need to provide us. So instead of us having to trawl through a lot of human source reporting on particular persons of interest, we're actually telling them, no, we're interested on the on-water element. So people like state and federal police may be interested in onshore elements. And like offshore elements, we are very tailored to vessels of interest, be it a mother or daughter vessel, and what their methodology is. We have to keep it very tight and tactical to support our operational command and our like forward deployed response assets, whether it's aerial or maritime. And it's in competition with our other CMS threats. So prohibited imports and exports is about the third tier at the moment. So we're already strapped for resources as it is. So we have to be very particular in the reporting and recommendations and assessments we provide to our command for them to coordinate their own response. I'll hand to Jason though, because he's our MDA guru.
Just sort of following on what Liv's already said. Yes, data deluge is a big issue, and because we have finite resources, the biggest thing for us is the prioritisation. As we get increasing capabilities, for example, overhead imagery, we are seeing a lot of vessels that are not on AIS. They're not necessarily inside our EEZ, but just adjacent to it. And to be frank, 90% of them will never get correlated by an MDA team. Unless we can fly assets out there, which we have a finite number of, we're simply not going to be able to know what those are. So sometimes for us, the hardest thing is deciding what not to track and what not to follow. And I'm sure that's probably an issue that a lot of people in this room are facing as well. But yeah.
Any other? David?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask about the different treatment of operational intelligence and strategic intelligence, and the suggestion that that from some of the regional information centres, you're receiving information more in the nature of strategic intelligence than operational intelligence. I wonder if someone could comment on that.
No, that's a good question. So we get a lot of source reporting that is fairly strategic compared to the operational level. But it's my team's job, or our intelligence centre's job, to make that strategic reporting operational. So it's a lot of what are we seeing in the region? Will it flow down to Australia? If so, how and when? So we, as MBC, we are not an intelligence collection function. We don't have the capability to, I guess, instigate the collection of intelligence strategically or for that purpose. So we rely a lot on federal police reporting, state police reporting, our intelligence network from the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, ASD. We gather a lot of their reporting and sort of condense it all into one digestible product. We aim for that anyway, to then provide that to our operational command to say this is what we're seeing in the region. So I know we've got the Singapore IFC annual and quarterly products that come out. Is really helpful for us because we, Australia geographically, we're in a very interesting area. We've got a massive maritime remit. So pretty much threats to each of our coastlines, whether it be east, west, north, south, very different. And it takes a lot of our partners to try and identify what that looks like strategically, but then to provide an operational recommendation or assessment to our command for them to effect a tactical response.
We've probably got time for a couple more questions. One at the back there.
Thank you. Appreciate all the comments. My question is specifically, you talked about a pattern of life in some of those cases. Could you just explain, how did you determine there was a deviation from pattern of life? What was the tool? How did you get to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's already been said that an MDA specialist can take up to 3 years to sort of train up, but it is hard. You do need to get an understanding for what looks normal and what isn't. I wish it was as easy as just writing down a list of indicators. It doesn't seem to be these days. It's a little bit like reading rips or currents in the ocean. You start to just get a feel for it, what's outside the norm. In the case of cuckoo in particular, I can speak to that because I was the one that unfortunately found it. Essentially, it was a very small bulk carrier that was Tanzanian flagged. It did have AIS on. I think it was, we focus quite heavily on looking for things that aren't on AIS, using some bespoke tools that we have access to. Long story short, it may have been just trying to slip in with every other vessel that was on AIS, but it wasn't reporting coming to Australia. So for us, it was just a case of looking for things that were in our domain that weren't coming to us, and then trying to figure out why. It could have forgotten to report it was going to Australia. The bulk carrier was much smaller than anything we saw coming down to Australia in the past, which didn't feel economically viable if it was carrying something from Australian port, or planning to take coal out of Newcastle, for example. It just wasn't economically viable. So yeah, for us, like I said, I wish I could just give you a list of indicators, but it's mostly just trying to understand the context around your own particular domain, just what fits in and what doesn't, and 9 times out of 10 it's just asking that question of, does this look weird to anybody else? Yes, it does. Let's investigate a little bit further. But I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow.
Okay, I think in the absence of my clock, I don't know whether I've been given special privilege as the Master of Ceremonies not to have a clock. But I'm pretty sure we're butting up against 12:10, which is the end of the session. So thank you again, for especially Olivia, for the comprehensive brief as to how Australia does business. Could I ask you all to put your hands together and thank the panellists. And with my Master of Ceremonies hat on now, lunch is served outside. And could I ask everybody to be back seated promptly at 13:05 to start the next session. Thank you.